if it's true what Barna says, that 43% of pastors, last year's survey, want to quit. This year it's 37% of pastors want to quit. And it may mean because 5 or 6% have already quit and resigned. That's why it's lower. What do you attribute that? What is making leadership so hard that even in the church, which would be crippling if we lost 37% of our pastors over the next year or two, what is happening that's making it so hard now than ever?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. One is I think it's always been hard, to be quite honest. Um, I'm counting on my memory here, so hopefully I'll be halfway close. But many years ago, it's now been over 30 years ago, when I worked at Christianity Today, I worked with the magazine Leadership, and we did a study on pastors, and it was about pastors being forced out of their church. And it was, I think, close to around 30% that had been felt as if they had been forced out of their church. So I think that still exists to a certain degree. And there was a lot of other research around this as well, that even in a very large church, it only takes 7 people for someone to feel forced out of their church. So you may have a congregation of 1,000, but it's those 7 people that are very persistent and just make it very difficult for the pastor, and they just finally sort of want to give up and want to walk away. So I think that still goes on a little bit, and I think part of that is related to the world that we live in today that is so divided, and trying to manage and minister within a divided congregation is just an incredibly difficult, thankless task that pastors are faced with on a daily basis. And, coming out of COVID especially, I would hear pastors say things like, well, I'm being told by my congregation I need to take a stand. And the pastor would say, but what they really want me to do is agree with their position. That's the stand they want me to take. They don't want me to take a stand. They want me to agree with them. And you're constantly in a no-win situation as a pastor when you're being forced to pick one side over another on, and the list of issues and topics seems to grow on a daily basis that we're trying to force people on one side or the other. And I think that just really wears on a pastor, and understandably so. And they just get tired of it.
Wow. I never thought about that. And every year, you're right, there are more issues to have an opinion on and take a stand. Presently, when this is being recorded, tariffs is a controversy. Do you support the tariffs or not? And so it's like one more thing, right?
Right.
And then some say, well, we should have a biblical stance on that. Well, what is that? The biblical stance on tariffs, And then you feel like you're... Now, when you said 7, was that due to the survey of Leadership Magazine, or you just said 7? That takes 7 people.
There has been other research outside of Leadership Magazine. We didn't focus so much on the number of people, but once we've started to get a sense for it's a small number, we found other research that had been done where it is a very small number of individuals that really become the problem for the pastor.
Yeah, I know of a friend just recently, I just heard yesterday, who resigned, and I think there are 3 or 4 families that were against him. And but you can imagine, in a large church there's 7, doesn't feel bad, but if we're people-pleasing pastors, that feels bad. But
Right.
if there are only 50 or 100 people in the church and there's 7, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You just don't feel of much self-worth. And was it Barna or somebody else who said youth pastors, there's only something like 3 to 5% who feel they're flourishing. Well, flipping it, that's 95% at least who are not feel like they're flourishing youth
Yeah.
ministry. And maybe they need a lot of affirmation. I spoke to somebody who was a president of a university and now is the president of a high school. And I said, hey, what's the difference? And he said, parents.
Oh,
Because in university, you don't deal with the parents as much.
right.
In a high school, why isn't my son the quarterback? Why isn't my son, the president of the student body or something? And he said that was a big, big difference. I never thought about that. There are more voices.
Right.
And if you're a trustee and you have a kid at the school. Oh my gosh. Then you have to listen to the trustee.
Right.
Oh, so it seems to me picking a leader today is harder than ever. And yet you are someone who's also into spiritual direction.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a big word in the spiritual direction, I don't want to say movement, but study,